Hi, and welcome to this Earth Day edition of 16 Minute Church. On this particular video, will probably be about 7 or 8 minutes, so not quite 16, but welcome and thanks for joining in. On this Earth Day, I wanted to start with a very short piece of music. It's one verse from a song that you can often find in church hymn books, and it's called "This is God's Wondrous World." This is God's wondrous world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is God's wondrous world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, God's hand the wonders wrought. So a little while ago, I was chatting with a friend in my church, and she was mentioning how during this COVID-19 time, when so many things are being shut down, some people are noticing that there are more birds around, that our rivers and lakes and waterways are cleaner, that the air is cleaner, there's less pollution, and I think that this is kind of not that we would wish, that our COVID-19 time on anyone, but it's kind of interesting to notice how as we shut down some of our industries, that things do improve. And I think when people discover that there are more birds singing, that the waterways are cleaner, that the air is cleaner, and that there's less pollution, it's a very hopeful thing for people to notice this. I think that people take a lot of delight in seeing this particular turn of events. So there's a way, just thinking about my friend who mentioned this, there's a way in which her faith in God, understanding that God has made the world and therefore the whole world is valuable, this kind of ties into a sensitivity towards God's creation, towards the natural world, and the delight in seeing that things improve and that we can do things to take good care of it. In 1966, a historian by the name of Lynn White, who was raised in a Christian home and understood very well a lot of dimensions of Christian life and thinking, he argued in a very famous paper that the reason for our environmental crisis is the way we look at the world. And one of the things he stated in his paper was that part of the reason for the way we look at the world is the influence of Christianity, and that because Christianity has said the whole world is God's creation, and that God has placed human beings in a sense in a position of being able to rule the creation, that this has led to an unhealthy dominance of the natural world where we exploit it, and instead of taking proper care of it, we take advantage of it in every way. So I would say that there was truth in what he was saying, and I don't think anybody would want to argue that there's that he didn't have some insight into what was going on and what continues to go on in the world. Definitely, if people have been in the past centuries, parts of churches, and they want a justification for their businesses or expanding things financially and so forth, and making a lot of money, that you could use this understanding in the Bible that God has placed human beings in a position of being able to control and dominate. And so this can become a very unhealthy thing. At the same time, and I don't want to excuse things in any way, but at the same time, we should understand that until recently, it has been very tough for most people to have enough food and enough material things to make life bearable, and life expectancies have been much shorter compared to what we're used to today. So, the relationship between people and nature was not quite as friendly as we might have it today, when we do seem to live in quite a lot of abundance. But nevertheless, I take Lynn White's critique, very, very seriously that looking at some parts of the Bible, you could see that there's a disagreement or an unhappiness between the Christian faith and the natural world all around us. But I don't think it needs to be that way. There are quite a number, for example, of gardens in the Bible. At the beginning of the Bible, there's the Garden of Eden. And at the end of the Bible, the Garden of Eden shows up again, the tree of life. In between, we find that Jesus has a lot of, well, it's interesting, he is able to speak and people's illnesses are cured. He's able to speak and winds calm and rain stops. So there's this relationship between Jesus, God's Son, and the natural world. The natural world obeys him, and in the biblical understanding, Jesus is involved in the creation of the whole natural world. He gives it its order and its purpose and meaning and so forth. So there's this wonderful relationship between Jesus and the natural world. He can bring out its goodness and cure its defects when they show up. There's some other ways in which the natural world appears in the Bible in relationship to the faith. And I'm going to read just one passage, but it's from a passage in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible from a book called Leviticus, and it's full of all kinds of rules and regulations. So here's about 10 or 12 lines. God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. Speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, when you enter the land which I'm going to give to you, the land will observe a Sabbath, a rest to God. Sow your fields and prune your vineyards and take in your harvest for 6 years. But the 7th year, the land will take a Sabbath of complete and total rest, a Sabbath to God. You will not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Don't reap what grows of itself, and don't harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land gets a year of complete and total rest. But you can eat from what the land volunteers during the Sabbath year. You and your men and women and servants and your hired hands and the foreigners who live in the country, and of course also your livestock and the wild animals in the land can eat from it. Whatever the land volunteers of itself can be eaten. So there's a sense in this passage in which absolutely, work that land and make it yield the crops that you need. But also the land deserves a rest, and animals do too, as well as people, a whole year off. And I'm not sure how much the Israelites paid attention to this particular commandment when they got to the promised land. People tend to want to get as much as we can from things. I think that was the situation then, just as much as it is today. But it strikes me that this passage gives a wonderful sense that the land is not to be exploited to the nth degree, and neither are people, and neither are our waterways or our families or our communities. There is meant to be rest. And so maybe this time of responding to COVID is an involuntary rest that we are giving to the land and to the resources around us. So you might also notice that I've got with me a painting by He Key, which I've got permission to use his work, but in it it's the story of Noah and the ark are depicted, and there's a lot of things going on in that story, but one of the things is that God preserves and protects the animals and the whole natural world. So I would say, let's take time to learn about things in our natural world. Let's understand and enjoy how animals and plants are part of our reality, and how they get along and how they work. Let's try to be close to farms and farmers as much as you can, and try to support them. And maybe as we recover from our COVID time, try to adopt some ways of life which are less demanding on God's world, and give rest to God's world and the creatures and the lands and the waterways and everything that's in them. This is God's wondrous world, and to my listening ears All nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is God's wondrous world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, God's hand the wonders wrought. Thanks very much, and please subscribe, please like, and please share, and see you next time.